and welcome to another episode of the Rolewise podcast, the show where we talk about things related to RPGs, mostly stuff that interests us. Today we're going to be diving into what was probably a pretty good post that was on nightattheopera.blogspot.com. I don't know if many of you guys get around on the blogosphere and stuff like that, but there's some pretty good articles that people put out there, and this one caught our eye. It was actually by Dwiz. I don't know them by any other name, but they had decided to really do a deep dive into initiative across many systems, and I honestly was surprised. I was like, "Oh, I know initiative." After I started reading this, I went, "How long is this article?" Because holy shit, is there a lot of different initiative types, styles, structures, variants, and all that kind of stuff. And they did a pretty good job, first of all, putting it out there, even if they critique their own categorization. But second of all, just, kind of got me interested about some of these other settings that I hadn't tried that have, combat initiatives that sound like they could be fun to attempt.
Initiative is one of those things that games have a tendency to try and reinvent the wheel on pretty frequently, for one reason or another. So yeah, there's a ton of them. There was like 16 in the article.
Oh, there was lots. There's I think he had 9 categories, and each
I didn't
add several subcategories.
I didn't count them all. Yeah, I didn't count them all, but there was a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Jeff, in initiative, can you say that you were honestly surprised at how many initiative styles vary otherwise?
Yeah, I mean, I've probably played 5 or 6 or 7 different systems with different initiatives. I didn't have any idea that this many existed. It was kind of nuts. It was kind of, I was kind of surprised, but like Brent said, a lot of games try to redo it because I think it's one of those things that depending on the setting and depending on the game you're playing, it doesn't always feel like it works the way you want it to work. So I think people are inventing things to try to improve it because the system itself is
well, and it's a way
besides necessary evil.
Yeah,
is that fair? I'm not saying I hate initiative. I'm just saying I haven't met a lot that I'm like, oh, that was great. Every time we need to do initiative, it feels perfect.
Initiative is also one of those things that's high bang for your buck. If you can make a new initiative system, you can distinguish yourself from other games, sort of like changing dice type, like using D6s instead of whatever. You can say my game is different because our initiative system is different. You see that, you can even see that in Daggerheart where they're like, ooh, our initiative system is the players just go
different and there's some feedback on that, and I don't know that the initiative system is going to survive. There's already an alternate suggested for people who don't like it, and who knows? The game's still in beta, so yeah, we're not trying to pick on anybody. It's just,
well, I was just using it as an example.
Yeah, because it's a good example. It's an excellent
because it's a recent example of a game that was we're different because our initiative system is non-existent, kind of.
Yeah. No, and it's actually it's curious because I think we can talk about those kind of specific examples a little bit more in just a moment, because I think just looking at the whole picture, the big picture here, when you guys think about what does an initiative system do for a game, you go, okay, there are definitely some pros to having a good initiative system, because and I don't want to necessarily single out any particular game, but I think that if you have an initiative system that's accomplishing its goals correctly, I think it feels to the players that it's fair. I think it's dynamic. It adds tension to the situation because it doesn't, it's not transparent as to how exactly it's going to play out. It gives you some stuff to work with, but it also has good flow, which I think that if you ever played D&D, I really don't feel like the initiative system in D&D flows very well. The everybody rolls a D20 as their initiative score, and then that's when they go, and then they just kind of it's easy, but it doesn't feel very because when it gets to your turn, you're finally like, oh shit, I should have been thinking about what I should have been doing. Oh man, I don't know, man. I just fireball everything.
Well, most of the time also that gets cut out because that gets reductive, because most of the time people don't you're supposed to redo the initiative every turn in D&D, and most people don't do that because it's a pain in the ass.
Oh yeah.
So they just leave the one initiative pass, and so like no one's ever moving around either, which like reduces the tactical stuff that's kind of like not supposed to be in D&D but really is, like that sort of thing. But yeah, I don't know. Initiative is a weird thing because I feel like it matters less in like I would split it into two categories. I'd split it into a narrative games initiative and a tactical games initiative. And the only reason you need them is because the more things that somebody can do in a turn, or the more complicated things somebody can do in a turn, the more you need an actual turn order to stop it from turning into an absolute shit show. Like before stream, we were talking about Shadowrun. Like when there's like auto fire and spells and like decking and like all the stuff that people can do in Shadowrun, like you need an initiative that's very rigid, because what the characters are going to do isn't going to be. It's going to be all over the place.
Well, and so for people that may not be familiar, which version of Shadowrun are you talking about? And can you elaborate on like their initiative?
All of them have kind of the same initiative progress, where it's like, and if I'm getting this wrong, somebody can correct me in the comments, but the basics of it is that you have your initiative score and you roll some dice and you roll this pretty high number. Like usually it's a 2-digit number. And I think you subtract 10 from the number and you go, so like if I roll, say, a 25 for my initiative, I would go at 25, and then anybody below 25 would go, and then I would go again at 15, and then anybody below me would go, and then I would go again at 5, and then when we hit 0, the initiative turn would be over. And that's how like being fast in Shadowrun also matters, because if you get injured, like if my character with a 25 initiative gets shot, say somebody had a 26 and shot me before I went, like the amount of damage will subtract from my roll as well. So like if I'm at a -2 modifier, then I will go at 23 instead of 25. But like that's why speed that's why like speed matters in Shadowrun, because the faster you go, the more turns you get. And you need that turn order kind of, because like I said, people are going to be doing a lot of things on their turn, like shooting guns, casting spells, summoning monsters, summoning spirits, and stuff like that. And that's one of the things that makes the game super crunchy, is because the game's crunchy, it has to have kind of a crunchy initiative system.
Gotcha. And I have to say that in my limited experience playing Shadowrun, at all the editions, I don't really get into the latest edition because reasons. But it does seem like the adept was always just popping off whenever there was a well-designed adept. Seemed to have a lot of actions that they could take in a turn. But,
well, if you're talking about Shadowrun, it's because you always take the initiative stuff. You take enhanced initiative, whether it's magic or like cyberware. And that just means you go for like, and if you go in Shadowrun, like I said, if the more injured you get, the worse you're doing. So it causes what Shadowrun, well, our little group called the spiral of death, where the more you get hurt, the worse you do, and the worse you do, the more you get hurt. So,
yeah.
But you need that crunchy initiative, because it's your actions are gonna matter. Whereas like in a more narrative game, just saying, okay, who on your side wants to go first? Okay, now the bad guy goes, isn't going to be that big of a deal.
And it's interesting, the Shadowrun example, because I think that there are two comments that I can make about it. Is first of all, I think the comment is that disparity, because if you have a character that has a very high initiative score, they get to do a lot in combat, which could possibly mean that somebody with a low initiative score could do very little in combat, if anything at all, depending on how the combat is structured. Is that a fair statement to say?
Well, yeah, it is. Well, the game's not. I mean, I wouldn't say Shadowrun as a game combat wise is balanced. Again, you're gonna have, it's an archetype. It's not an archetype system, but it's like you're going to make a character that's good at something. Like if you're a street samurai, you're going to be good at fighting, which means you're probably going to go fast. Whereas if you're a decker, you're probably going to be slow at combat, and you probably shouldn't be engaging in that so much,
or at all. And so that of course leads to the question of metagaming, like how true do people stay to their characters and what actions they would take in these kind of crunchy initiative systems, or do they just go, I'm a mini nuke, I blow it up?
The same thing happens in D&D. Like,
it's true.
That's why dexterity is always the stat that people like don't make high, regardless of what kind of character they are. It helps your initiative, it helps your armor class, it helps you hit things. Like that's why people always like meta is that's why agility is always the stat that people take.
It's true. It's true. So I guess in terms of this article, it was, I mean, we'll post the article and anybody can kind of pursue it if they want to. If it's a really good read, and I don't think that we're going to have the ability to kind of give all the different initiative styles that he or they, I don't actually know, or that they put out there as a, you know, like as much detail and analyze them as closely as we want. But I was curious, just to kind of start with, of the type of initiative styles that they had, what would you say like your favorite initiative style is? Jeff, did you like had one that really resonated with you? Whether or not you played the game, that's kind of irrelevant, but just the way that it described the game, could you find one that you like there?
I tend to gravitate towards initiative systems that let the players choose, or that let everybody kind of go at the same time, because it makes more tactical things happen in the order that they need to happen.
Okay.
Like the more rigid a system is, and if you can't like give up your initiative for somebody else, like there are just sometimes combos between players where you need A to go first and then you need B to happen. You can't have B happening and then A happening because you don't get the right bonuses or the right help. And so when you have abilities like that work with teammates, it's fun. It feels good to have them go off in the right order rather than being at the whim of dice where the wrong person keeps rolling the better initiative and the person that needs to go first, keeps rolling the lousy one. So I having said that, I can acknowledge that unless you have the right table that can handle, sorting it out on the fly, quickly without a ton of debate, it's messy. I know why rigid, fixed, orders, strict die roll stuff exists, because some tables, it's the only way you could get anybody to agree on anything. There are some tables where just the same person always wants to go first. Like they just can't live if they're going later than first or second. So,
and there's also that component of it is that nobody likes to have too complicated of a system to work through, because they don't want the time it takes to work out through
right.
very complicated.
Well, it slows down combat, right? It slows down combat if it takes too long, or you have to roll every round, or
and obviously to harken back to the 44 rules, like what was it? You get 1 minute. Your action's got to be.
You get 1 minute.
I'm glad somebody mentioned that. I was going to bring it up if no one else did.
No, let's bring it.
You only have 1 minute. You only have 1 minute to do your shit.
Yeah, and 1 minute, it doesn't give you a lot of time to like put your heads together and kind of plan out that let's run plan A, guys. Let's run plan A option 6.
As they say in wrestling, go out there and get your shit in.
I did not know that's what they said, but
yeah,
makes sense.
Yeah, go out there and do your shit. But yeah, I mean, any game where you have planning, like it's always better if the players can pick if you want that type of game. Like a lot of games try and like they talked about in the article, some games try and simulate the realism of like combat, where like you don't know what the other person's doing. So like there isn't really a planning phase.
That's true.
Yeah. So like and so Brent, for you, did you have any that were standouts as to initiatives that either you have or haven't played that you said, hey, this is awesome?
I will always say you should probably play the initiative that comes with the game, just because that's how it's designed if you're using their rules. Because again, if it's a tactical game, you're going to need organization. My preference is for games that are more narrative based, where it doesn't matter. Like you can do whatever you want, basically. Like most of the games that I really enjoy are like, yeah, players go first and then the bad guys can go. Do they have an advantage? Maybe, maybe not. It's hard to say. Like I prefer that sort of thing, just because it's easy. And like I'm not a big fan of like super tactical combat anyways. So that's my preference. I will tell you one that I didn't like on the list.
Okay. Hit me with the one you didn't like.
I really didn't like the one that was like have the players write their actions down and then hand them to the GM, and then the GM adjudicates like what happens with the written directions. Like, God, that would be the slowest combat in the universe. All right, let me go ahead and read the book of the stuff that you want to do on your turn, Bob.
Yeah. So what you're describing there was the written orders from a simultaneous perspective, and basically, and what they describe it as is that it came from standard and old school wargaming, where to kind of like
that was the Burning Wheel one. That was the Burning Wheel system.
Oh, there was also one for Burning Wheel that adjusts that, because it's basically a written order method that they used.
Yeah, the Burning Wheel one is specifically the one I'm talking about, which made me never want to try the game because it sounds like it would be the least fun thing to run in my life.
Because there were two ways that were, well, at least two of the ways that they described written orders is that one way that, you have effectively, everyone passes their action over to the referee, who then decides the results and looks at everybody's cards and see how it all plays out. Like the chaotic melee that erupts from everybody's actions is what it is. Whether or not your action resulted in anything positive, obviously that's for the DMGM and all that stuff. But the Burning Wheel was even more insane to me, because not only was it a written orders method, but it had additional constraints, and each exchange then brought it into 3 different chunks that they called volleys. And everybody had to write down their actions for the whole exchange ahead of time, split across 3 volleys, and then you only revealed the volleys one at a time. And I was like, I mean, I guess I'd have to play with it first to see how I really appreciate it, because I'm sure that, because the Burning Wheel is a very popular game among people that I've heard that played it, but I just have a hard time imagining how this combat.
I can make an assessment just based on that information, and I do not think I would enjoy running the game. I don't think I would enjoy it. It's the one game I could say it doesn't sound like I would enjoy playing the game. Like, I wouldn't enjoy writing notes before. I wouldn't enjoy writing 3 paragraphs to describe what I'm doing in different pages and then handing them to the GM. But I think Burning Wheel also is like, you do one thing like that a session, maybe every couple sessions. But I just can't even. Like, that's hard to fit around it. That's hard to fit in my head. And then you have the problem of people like, I can't read your goddamn handwriting. What am I gonna do? No, if I was doing that to a GM, I'd be like, sorry, figure it out. You're gonna have to talk to me anyways, because you're not gonna be able to read it. The insane scrawl of my handwriting is like, I guess I'll text it to you, because
type it up.
No, like a lot of the systems, like especially like the Burning Wheel one, felt like it was really specific to that type of game. Like I don't think anybody would go, oh yeah, let's put this in a D&D or a Pathfinder game, unless you were playing something really epically huge army type stuff. I think the Burning Wheel, like the initiative system, works in that game. Like, I'm tiny bit familiar with Burning Wheel. I've never played, but it seems, having read it, I can kind of see how it would work, but it feels very specific to the game. It doesn't feel like you're going to translate it to D&D or Pathfinder or something else. Hopefully,
like I said, I suggest not doing that with games, because don't ever try to make I feel like you should never try and make a game's initiative system more complicated than what's presented in the book. Make it easier. Try and make it easier, maybe, but I would never say make it harder. And it's funny because I think Mouse Guard is Burning Wheel, and I never read that in the rules. I never read that it was like, write a book and then pass it to your GM, and then the next session he'll have decisions made for what you're going to do. It's not a full
book. I mean, it's a novella at best.
I think it depends on your players, man.
It's true.
Well,
I just I don't know. That was the one that stuck out to me the most. The others are all pretty are pretty standard. Like the Troika one is just weird.
And it's its own beast.
And it will feel unfair sometimes. Like, it will absolutely feel unfair to the players, because there is a chance that you will draw all of the monsters and then draw the end of turn card, and your characters won't get a turn. But I don't know if initiative always has to be fair either. I just think it has to be. Personally, I was going to say this before we had your technical issues, is I think trying to simulate an actual fight is like beyond. Like you're never gonna come up with an initiative that feels good at that, because it's like anybody who's been in a real fight, it is so strange. It's such a weird feeling. Like there's no real way to like. I don't think there's a real way to emulate that. Even so much as like fights in movies and books and everything doesn't really simulate fighting very well either.
No. Well, I mean, but like even when you watch combat sports, right, where there's some back and forth, there are times when one person has an advantage and is pressing it, and in gaming terms, they get 4, 5, 6 attacks in a row, and the other person gets almost nothing to respond. And if you tried to bust that out in your role-playing game and go, I'm sorry, Steve, you don't get to go this round again. you know,
right?
After about the third time of that, Steve's probably getting up and leaving.
Yeah, which is why the ones that are like Pathfinder, which is a skill check for initiative, like that probably simulates that sort of thing realistically the best, as in the higher skill person's probably going to go first.
Yeah,
but,
well, and
like
that's how DC 20 also does their initiative, right? It's kind of like that. Well, how are you approaching the situation? You know, like what were you doing?
Yeah, and I think that lends it, you know, to a little bit more narrative type style. You know, I realize there's a check. I realize to use narrative and check in the same sentence.
But I mean, you can have a narrative.
Can describe it.
You can have a narrative game where you have that sort of like a little bit crunchy initiative system. And like I said, as far as like the most skilled guy going first, those are probably the best way to simulate that, is some sort of skill check, and then the person goes. Like there were also other weird systems like the pods where like
the light. I thought the lantern one was where like everyone around the light had more of an initiative.
That's a weird one. Objective based, that's very tactical, like objective based. Like if you're closer to A, you get better initiative than people who aren't. Like that was a weird one. I'm talking more about the one that was like where, and I don't remember what game it was for, but like you could say, I'm going to go fast this turn. And you get one action, and then everybody else that goes, I'm going slow. It's
that was the speed sandwich, or some variation of the speed sandwich, because it went fast actions, and you got one fast action, then it got enemies got to go, and then slow actions got 2 actions. Then there were some variations on the speed sandwich that like the guerrilla initiative variation was kind of interesting, because basically it took that, fast enemy slow, and what it did is it said like there's a guerrilla initiative, whichever side has fewer members always goes first. And that was kind of neat, because it did kind of stress that like having a large group to organize them to make them work cohesively usually was harder than taking a smaller group of people and all that stuff. So I like the speed sandwich. I did find it interesting. I
thought that was interesting.
No, I think anybody reading this blog post is going to learn, unless you are super steeped in hundreds of role-playing games. I think there's something that you'll learn. It may not be something you ever want to try, but he was very thorough in the blog post, and I really liked it.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and
it was interesting.
He presented some that have never been published anywhere in a game. They were just like thought experiments on blogs, which are kind of interesting too. Like some of them, like I said, I prefer just simple as opposed to complicated.
And this is something that I kind of enjoyed, and I think you might enjoy this one too. But it was the miss initiative, or the failure switching one that was out there. That was you go until somebody misses. And so what's interesting is it kind of reminds me almost like what they tried to do in Daggerheart, where basically until you roll with fear, then as the GM I get to do something, right? So kind of similar to that. But
I would say that 100%. I would say that 100% falls in that category.
Well, it's close, but I think in Daggerheart, because there's no real and like you could go on a rip and there's no real quote unquote end to your turn unless the DM just forces the end, right? Whereas this one actually has an end to the turn. Right. So if you have 3 players and 6 monsters, once the 3 players go, the monsters get to, if they survived, obviously they get to go do their thing.
Yeah, if your 6 players go without failing, then the monsters get to go.
Yeah, and if they usually have had their ass whooped, as it was said, and that makes sense. I mean, but I kind of like the concept of that. And to your point, the players having the advantage is always nice, because the players, having be a team, they're heroic, they get in there and doing all
that feels very heroic.
Mm-hmm.
That sort of system would feel very heroic unless I was playing it.
Yeah. Well,
and then everybody would be like, Brent goes last. That's what everybody would say is Brent goes last.
Our Dragonbane, experience last night.
I did well last night.
That was fun.
Though,
yeah, Brent did good. Yeah,
I did good. Did good.
But that's a card based system.
Yeah. The initiative is card based. Yeah.
Yeah, and
it's random every turn.
It is. I still don't fully know how I feel about card. I don't dislike them, but I don't think I love them. But
well, it's just
playing the game, and that's how they
just randomly get ordered, and there's nothing you can do to there's nothing that you can do to change your initial place in the order, except for maybe a heroic ability or something like that. And you can obviously change your spot.
You can trade spots, yeah. But I mean, it's really no different than D&D initiative. Everybody rolls a dice and then goes in an order.
That's true.
Like it's not.
Well, some of the monsters get an extra, like depending on the monster. Some of them get like 2 initiatives.
But that's really no different than legendary actions in
that's true.
5th edition.
Okay,
they can just do those. And I think he called that out in the blog post actually. Like they could just do those whenever. So I mean that's really not that different. But like I mean essentially the funny thing about the 27 systems or whatever was in there, it's basically just who goes first. Like that's all you're really trying to determine. So a lot of them are just like randomizers. It's just like you could just flip a coin for it, really. So they're just general randomizers, unless it's a permissive system where it's like, oh yeah, players go first or players go until somebody misses or whatever.
Although I'm going to say, out of all the initiatives there, because most of these initiatives I was like, oh, I could see how that could be interesting, fun, useful, like the initiative where the lowest health person gets to go first or the tank gets to go first. You know what I'm saying? Like those were interesting little variant twists and stuff. But the Street Fighter storytelling game, did you guys read that one? That was like
I couldn't get through all of that one.
That was the one that I was like, okay, I don't think I would like this, because everyone has a hand of card representing their fight maneuvers. And I've never played Street Fighter, the storytelling game.
I have not either, no.
So at the start of the round, everyone secretly selects a card, and then everyone declares what speed their card is. The person with the slowest speed goes first, getting to move and then use their maneuver. Sounds backwards, right? That's what he said, or the author said.
Right.
At the time, this is a quote from the author, but at any time during that person's movement, any other player with fast maneuver can interrupt and take their own turn, moving them, maneuvering, then returning to interrupt the player to finish their turn. This is all quoted from the article here. But the interruptions can be interrupted by players with faster maneuvers, who themselves can be interrupted with even faster maneuvers. So it's like, that would feel such an asshole. Like,
well, you're just basically like, it's basically chicken for initiative. It's basically like, all right, I'm gonna go now. Who's going?
Yeah.
Okay, no one. Okay, now I'm going.
A Duke and whatever.
Yeah.
And it's so funny because I imagine like somebody's like, oh, I'm gonna do my Honda slapping, and then I'm like, aha, just kidding, I dragon punch you. Aha, well, just kidding to you. I don't even know how the Street Fighter storytelling game works into this. I mean, like, do you have like one-on-one fights with somebody? I don't know how.
It sounds interesting. It sounds like it's worth some exploration, but
yeah, I mean, I just read that and I imagine being like, oh, I try to do my cool thing and then I have to literally, like, all the excitement I had for doing my cool thing went out the window by the time I finally got to do my cool thing. So, but I did also like the shot clock one. That was kind of nice.
The feng shui one.
Yeah. Well, I was gonna say we've played feng shui, and so I've used the shot clock before. I didn't hate it. I think it kind of worked for the game.
If it's a theme. Well, it's like all combat. Like the rules need to fit the theme, and it fits the theme for feng shui. And also, it's that's a system where like there's a lot of shit that's going to be going on. Like there's a lot of stuff that's going to be flying around, including people. So like a little more organization is good.
Yeah, I just liked it because like you basically get like an action economy that is it, because what I'm not liking and I'll just use Dragonbane as kind of the whipping boys. I really don't like minimal action economy games where it's just like you get to your turn and you have like the joke we made when we played was like, oh, I crack my neck cinematically. Oh, that's a free action. You already did a free action. You know, to get up like that. That was, I mean, it was funny, but it was also kind of true that rules is written. You know, you can't have your, what is that, Mission Impossible with the shoots his,
you don't get to freelance extra stuff before you make the attack.
We obviously allowed it for the rule of cool, but
well, I think you do. I mean, I made that joke just to be an ass, but I think you do get those actions. Like, it might not feel like it rules wise, but I think that's one of those rulings over rules things.
Yeah,
as the OSR kids would say.
Yeah, but I just, that limitation is so confining in some ways that you're literally like, oh, I can either attack, parry, evade, or do a small number of other things, and it's like, it feels very restrictive, even though it's not. I mean, they're not telling you like you can't interact with the environment or anything like that, but it just feels like I got one shot at this one time. You know, like, I got this.
Well, the problem is, and the reason rules like that are there is because you'll have groups of people who will talk for 15 minutes, and you're like you can't say all that in a 6-second combat round. Like, you can't just monologue. Like,
yeah, you're trying to get your manifesto, and you got to the first paragraph.
And we've all been at that table where someone is. Well, I mean,
I think I've done that.
I think one of our players does that pretty consistently in our home game, where he will talk a lot in his turn and be like, you can't, like, I don't think you can get all that out in six seconds.
We won't mention who that is. So ultimately, like, initiative is a very interesting topic. It was fun to read this blog to kind of get some ideas. I do want to try some of these other games just to see how that type of initiative plays out, like a certain type of initiative. And also, I think that, as you homebrew your own game, I'll be the first to admit that I have taken styles of play from other games and input them into my game, when playing D&D and stuff like that. Like, I wanted a grittier D&D system, so I took the Game of Thrones RPG and used their wonky ass rules for health and attack and defense and all that stuff, and it created a very, very deadly system.
You mean your halfling killing system?
It was specifically designed to kill halflings, especially halfling barbarians. So
yeah, that's true.
So you guys are both GMs, and I just want your thoughts on this, because towards the end, there was something that made me laugh out loud. It was just a tiebreaker, where the tiebreakers for initiative are settled by whoever got to the game session first. Like, did you, as a GM, did you guys appreciate that? Rewarding,
who wrote that? Like, I remember, because I remember
Robin Laws and the Unearthed.
Yeah, that's such a Robin Laws thing. Like, he does like, he makes some, just in a lot of his games, he makes some like meta decisions like that. And those are always funny. Like, don't be late to the game. Like, I can see that. I can see that's almost that's almost a 44 rules thing. If you're late to the game, any tiebreaker that comes up for initiative, you will lose. You lose.
But
I thought it was funny.
I'm not opposed to it. How about that?
Yeah,
like,
sure.
Whatever you need to do for a time. I mean, frankly, like, again, that's one of those things where it's like flip a coin. It doesn't matter to me, but it does seem a little punitive when it's like, you were late, you lose this tie.
But I'm always late. I never get to go first.
But at least it's a rival instead of something weird like, oh, you bought me dinner, you win all ties.
Oh,
or,
yeah. Like,
you bought me a carton of magic cards. Oh, you.
I mean, it's not unfair or mean. Like, it's just, very pointed probably at some specific people with the game that they were playing at the time.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I wanted, as you guys being GMs, I wanted your perspective, because I was like, that's kind of funny. I chuckled. I was like, that's good.
It was very funny. It was very funny. Just that, like, well, it's always funny when like, you see people's home games leak into their published material. It's always kind of funny when that happens. Jonathan Tweet does that in the Over the Edge game, where he talks about the first Over the Edge game that he played, and he's talking about a character that was a power balance atrocity, is what he called the character. And it's always interesting to just read, like I said, it's interesting to read what happens at other people's home tables when they're doing it, and that's obviously a holdover from a home game.
Oh yeah, like and if you have the option to like bring some of that into, it's kind of cool because it's also like just a slight glimmer of insight into their world.
Yeah.
I like it, but I can't think of any really off the top of my head. You know, obviously I've heard that like, you know, the Dragons of Fall or whatever, Legend, whatever that Dragonlance, Dragons of something, Spring, Fall, Summer, Flame, all that stuff. You know, the 4 books, the seasonal
right.
books.
Just say the Dragonlance books.
The Dragonlance books. There are other Dragonlance books, but those ones, like I heard, at least I thought that was based somewhat on.
It is. It was based on their home game.
Yeah. So to be able to like kind of see how their home game went and how epic it became was kind of neat. You know, that kind of stuff.
But I mean, I think it's more interesting to see actual rules that crept in based on somebody's obvious behavior at the table. Like I've seen other ones where it's just like, if you know, dice, like there was some other game, I think it had dice stacking in it. The first player that's stacking dice like loses initiative or something like that, like because they're obviously not paying attention, you know, that sort of thing. Like just funny how you see it a lot in indie games more often than you do, of course, big box games, but it's always funny when some of that stuff sneaks in.
Yeah. So with that, we conclude our light discussion on initiative. We hope you enjoyed. If you did, please comment with your own favorite systems of initiative. Where, you know, what games have you played that you thought initiative worked well? What games did you hate how the initiative runs? All that kind of stuff. Let us know what you're thinking. We'll jump in the comments afterwards and either commiserate or get some ideas, hopefully. And Jeff, if they want to talk with us outside of the comments on YouTube, where would they go?
They would go to Facebook, Twitter, or Threads, and they would look for @rolewise. You can also email us, especially if you have something almost as long as Dwiz's A Night at the Opera blog post. Rollwiseguys@gmail.com.
And as always, thank you for joining in our conversation. We hope you enjoyed it. We hope you will join us in the comments, and roll well, roll wise, and be safe out there, everybody.
See ya.
Thanks.